Good afternoon, juniors. I hope you are staying safe and sane during this time off of school and that you're taking care of yourselves. Today, we are going to be working on the stapled worksheet that on one paper says Irony and Sarcasm Overview, and the second one says Double Meaning the Cask of Amontillado. So let's start with the definition side for irony. Irony is the discrepancy between what is said and what is meant, what is said and what is done, what is expected or intended and what happens, what is meant or said and what others understand. The three most common forms of irony are verbal irony, situational irony, and dramatic irony. So let's look at verbal irony first. Verbal irony is when the speaker says something different from what he or she really believes. It is generally created using sarcasm, understatement, or hyperbole. I think we're all pretty versed in sarcasm. Understatement is being overly, kind of chill on a subject that you should have more emotion about, but you're way understating it. And hyperbole, if you do not know, is highly over dramatic, over exaggeration. But we'll get to that later. The example on the paper says when someone says, McDonald's, a palace suited only for kings and princes. That is verbal irony and also hyperbole because McDonald's obviously is, I don't think you'll find many kings or princes there. Or what nice weather we're having, somebody says during a blizzard. So if we look at an example of verbal irony from the Cask of Amontillado, I would like you to look at page 10, column 2. So give yourself a moment to look at that and near the top, and let's see if you can find where it is. I'm going to read this section. Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle, which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mold. Drink, I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly, while his bells jingled. I drink, he said, to the buried that repose around us, and I to your long life. He again took my arm and we proceeded. These vaults, he said, are extensive. The Montressors, I replied, were a great and numerous family. Okay, somewhere in that section was an example of verbal irony. And if you guessed where Fortunato said, I drink to the buried that repose around us, and Montressor replied, and I to your long life, then you would be correct. Congratulations. If you didn't, no worries. So take a moment to pause this video and write that down for your example of verbal irony on the next page. Hopefully you have that written down. So let's talk about the actual meaning of this example. So Montressor says that he drinks to Fortunato's long life. But this is not true. He's being ironic here because when he says that, we really know that he is drinking to Fortunato's death. And that would be our actual meaning of the example. So this is what we're going to do. Take a moment to write that down. And once you have that written down, we're going to go through examples of each: dramatic irony, situational irony, sarcasm, hyperbole, and another example of irony. And then I'm going to give you that answer. And then we're going to talk about what the actual meaning is. I'm going to give you some of those, and some of those you're going to have to do on your own. So once you're ready, let's look for dramatic irony. Back on the first worksheet, dramatic irony is defined as when the narrative or the story gives the audience more information about the story than a character knows. So either you as an audience member know more than any character, or you and a character or two know more than one of the characters. So for an example of dramatic irony in the Cask of Amontillado, I want you to go to page 9, which is the first page, column 1, and I'm going to read this section. And I want you to try and figure out where the dramatic irony is. Again, dramatic irony is you know something that the character does not know. And to make it even easier, you and Montresor know something that Fortunato don't know. All right, column 1. It must be understood that, this is paragraph 2, by the way. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. Did you figure it out? If you picked the sentence that said, I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation, you would be correct. Remember, those words want means habit, and immolation means death. So, take a moment to write that example down in the first column. And now let's talk about the actual meaning. What is it that you and Montresor know in that statement that Fortunato does not? Well, throughout the story, Fortunato is completely unaware that Montresor, who he thinks is his friend, actually wants him dead. So that would be the meaning behind it. The Montresor knows that the smile is of evil deeds. Fortunato thinks that it is a friendly smile. All right. Now that you have written that down, let's move on to situational irony. Situational irony is when the reader expects something to happen that does not happen. So for this, I want you to go to page 12 in column 2, which is the last page of the story. I'm going to read this and try and figure out the section of the story that you would expect one thing to happen, but something else does. No answer. I called again. Fortunato. No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up against the new masonry. I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For the half a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace requiescent. I don't know how to say that. I gave this portion away when we read the story together. So, what do you think it is? If you said, my heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs, you are correct. Ding, 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 ding. You get a prize. Remind me and give it to you when we get back to school. All right. So, write down the example and let's go over the actual meaning. We went over this again. So, what do we expect? What does the reader expect? The reader expects that Montresor is growing sick because he's just killed Fortunato, or he's in the process of killing him. That would make sense. However, understanding that Montresor is not a sensical person, Montresor reveals that the real reason his heart has grown sick is because of the physical environment of being in the catacombs. So this is why this is situational irony. Moving on to my personal favorite, sarcasm. Sarcasm is a praise that is really an insult. It generally involves the desire to put someone down. The example that I will be using will be from page 9, the first page of the story, column 1, paragraph 5. See if you can spot it. I said to him, my dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts. Our example is, that I need you to write down is, I said to him, my dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. Why is this sarcasm? Well, This is sarcasm because, from Fortunato's point of view, Montresor is legitimately, literally happy to see him and saying that he looks well. But Montresor does not mean it like that. He means to insult him, to insult his look, and what else? I want you to figure this part out. From Montresor's point of view, what is his real meaning about saying that Fortunato is luckily met? Again, I said this portion when we went through the reading, so take a moment to figure that out and write that down. Let's move on to hyperbole. Hyperbole is an extreme and deliberate exaggeration or overstatement for effect. An example of that could be, I'm dying of boredom. Well, boredom cannot really kill you, although it may feel like it. It can't. Or if you've ever said or heard, I'm starving, because you're a little hungry. You're not actually starving. At least I hope not. All right, so knowing that, the example of hyperbole we are going to find from the text is in page 9, column 1, paragraph 1. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. All right, did you figure it out? If you said the 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, you would be correct. So take a moment to write that down in the first column. And then for the second column, I want you to do this one by yourself. Pretty much answer this question. What in that first line is Montresor exaggerating? And why would he exaggerate it to you, the reader? What would be the purpose of exaggerating that point for you? Once you have that down, the last example on your worksheet is asking you to find another example of irony. And this one I'm going to leave up to you. It could be any of the three: dramatic, situational, or verbal. If you are really struggling, I would look maybe at the last page. But there are so many examples if you don't want to just look there. Good luck. As always, email me if you have questions or concerns, and keep plugging along. I'm going to take a couple of days off before I record your next story, which is Young Goodman Brown, because I have to get some recordings up for the seniors. But I'm going to try and get it done by the end of the week. If you want to send me your worksheets either through email or pictures so I can get the grades in right away, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, just hold on to them. And you could also start the vocab for Young Goodman Brown. Heck, if you want to give it the read a try, go ahead. There's a lot of double meanings there, but the language is easier to understand. But I will keep updating you when I get these uploaded. So keep working. I hope you are doing well. All right. Till next time.